Hello ladies and gentlemen, it is a pleasure to see you again in today's news program. Here, we and you will share and interact with the latest news and hottest events that are of interest to the public at home and abroad. Details will be available shortly.
On September 19th, speaking to reporters at the White House, U.S. President Donald Trump said the country is benefiting from the conflict in Ukraine. In contrast to the unconditional military aid approach that the previous administration provided to Kyiv, Mr. Trump emphasized, "We are not going to spend any more on conflicts. We make money on everything we send." Unlike former U.S. President Joe Biden, he gave them $350 billion in aid, and that is incredible. Actually, I don't want to make money on that conflict, but we are actually making money on that war because they are buying our equipment. The White House leader emphasized that the Ukraine conflict is now mainly funded by the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Mr. Trump praised the agreement he signed last July. Accordingly, the U.S. will transfer weapons to NATO, then the alliance will forward them to Ukraine and pay 100% of the money for these weapons. Military aid is carried out according to the mechanism of Ukraine's priority request list. Under this program, Ukraine makes a list of its military needs and send it to NATO. Then, partner countries will buy U.S. weapons corresponding to this list and transfer them back to Ukraine to AS of 16. The Trump administration has approved 2 of the 4 aid packages under this initiative. According to NATO, some of the equipment has arrived in Ukraine, the rest is still in transit. European countries are expected to contribute $1.08 billion a month to buy U.S. weapons for the Ukrainian Defense Forces. Mr. Trump has frequently criticized former President Biden for approving large military aid packages to Ukraine and once described Ukrainian leader Volodymyr Zelensky as the greatest salesman in the world. The White House boss also stressed that NATO members in Europe should take primary responsibility for supporting Ukraine. In another development on May 19th, Kremlin Demoscope spokesman stressed that President Trump is still pursuing efforts to reach a solution to the conflict in Ukraine. Recently, Mr. Oleksiy, who supervises a unit of the Ukrainian Territorial Defense Forces responsible for protecting the city of Irpin, said that his team is being trained to use new interceptor UAVs to deal with Russian attack and close-in UAVs. According to Business Insider, in recent months, Russia's increased scale of UAV attacks has forced Ukraine to rethink how to operate its air defense system and find cost-effective solutions. In particular, interceptor UAVs have emerged as the optimal solution for many units. The unit commanded by Mr. Oleksiy mainly uses machine guns mounted on truck beds to deal with UAVs. However, machine guns are only effective when stopping low-altitude threats. Meanwhile, Russia is increasingly using high-altitude UAVs that are beyond the attack range of machine guns. Typically, Oleksiy's unit is using a heavy machine gun made in the U.S., the M2 Browning, with an effective range of 2,000 m. According to Mr. Oleksiy, the current need of his unit is interceptor UAVs with a range of 5,000 m to defeat Russian UAVs. Mr. Oleksiy's unit is undergoing a multi-week training course to learn how to integrate FPV interceptor UAVs into the operation. It is known that the interceptor UAVs can fly at a speed of 300 kilometers per hour and cost only $2,000 to $3,000 per device. Equipped with small warheads, the Ukrainian interceptor UAVs can destroy all suicide UAVs and reconnaissance UAVs of Russia, thereby supporting in situations where the M2 Browning cannot reach the target. Mr. Oleksiy described the new interceptor UAVs as a pilot project for his unit. He also emphasized that the soldiers are always ready to apply new innovative technologies to increase the effectiveness of air defense operations. This year, Russia has stepped up its investment in UAV operations, adding more production sites and building more launch zones to expand the scale of attacks on targets in Ukraine. Every month, Russia is producing thousands of attack drones modeled after Iran's UAVs. Moscow has also demonstrated its ability to launch hundreds of UAVs into Ukraine every night. According to recent Western assessments, in the future, the number of UAVs that Russia launches every night could increase to 2,000. To cope, Ukrainian manufacturers are also stepping up the production of low-cost interceptor UAVs. after President Vladimir Zelensky set a new target for companies to produce 1,000 UAVs a day. NATO members are also joining in to help. Typically, in September, the UK announced that it would jointly develop thousands of low-cost combat UAVs for Ukraine.
The U.S. has recently been looking to re-establish its military base in Afghanistan. However, the Taliban, the force in power in Afghanistan, has said it will not abandon the Bram Air Base. This is despite U.S. President Donald Trump saying on 18th that Washington plans to retake control of the site. The U.S. abandoned BR just before the Taliban took over the country in 2021. Batram Base, about 65 kilometers from Kabul, is the largest base in Afghanistan. It has been a key base for U.S.-led operations for 2 decades since the U.S. launched its military campaign in Afghanistan in 2001. Speaking during a state visit to the UK, Mr. Trump said he wanted the base back because of its strategic location near China. Taliban Interior Ministry spokesman Mudi Adnan Martin Kwan told The Telegraph that Mr. Trump's statement was far from the truth, ruled out handing over control of the base to the U.S. forces and stressed that we will never hand over Param to anyone. Those statements are baseless. Zaki Zalan, a Taliban foreign ministry official, also said that Afghanistan and the U.S. need to talk to each other, but not for the U.S. to maintain a military presence anywhere in Afghanistan. The two countries can build economic and political relations based on mutual respect and common interests, he added. During its 2 decades of military presence in Afghanistan, the U.S. has turned Batram into a giant complex that can accommodate tens of thousands of troops, restaurants, and shopping malls. UAV fighters and transport planes operate around the clock from the base's 2 runways. The Pentagon abandoned the base in a hasty withdrawal from Afghanistan shortly after the Taliban launched a campaign to regain power in 2021. The loss of BR is seen as a strategic and moral loss for the U.S. Mr. Trump has repeatedly criticized the U.S. for losing control of the base since returning to power. The Taliban's foreign policy, spokesman Kwana asserted, is based on balanced relations with Western, Eastern, and regional countries. We do not seek conflict with anyone. He said the Taliban has achieved many successes in its internal policies and does not need outside interference. An example, the war on drugs, he said, was clearly a war on drugs, asserted that while the previous administration received huge sums of money in the name of fighting drugs, Afghanistan under our leadership is moving towards eliminating drugs and smuggling, bringing the country close to zero. Earlier this year, the Taliban signaled its willingness to improve relations with the U.S. administration. Sir Mohammad Abbas Ani Qazi, a former Taliban deputy foreign minister, described Mr. Trump as decisive and courageous and called for friendly relations with Washington. He said Afghanistan, the Emirates' tone, is always open. If they want to be friends, we will shake hands and be friends.
On September 19th, in the Oval Office, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a new visa program for the world's super-rich that would encourage them to immigrate to the U.S. by offering residency at a very high price. In ordering the visa program, Mr. Trump said they would spend a lot of money to get into the U.S. It would bring in billions of dollars that could be used for tax breaks, debt repayments, and other good causes. According to a website announcing the program, individuals can pay $1 million to receive U.S. residency with a gold card after paying a processing fee and passing a background check. A platinum card will soon be introduced for $5 million that will allow holders to stay in the U.S. for up to 270 days without being taxed on their foreign income. Businesses that pay $2 million per employee can also get residency for an unspecified number of workers. It remains to be seen when the visas will be issued. The website has an Apply Now section, asking applicants to provide their name, region of residence, and email address. Immigration experts say Congress may need to approve the program. Commerce Secretary Hugh Ludnick has predicted the plan could bring in more than $100 billion for the U.S. government. Trump unveiled the gold card in February, touting it as an initiative to attract investment, create jobs, and provide revenue to reduce red tape. Ludnick was at the White House on March 19th to join Trump in announcing the initiative. The visas for the super-rich are part of Trump's efforts to overhaul the immigration system, which includes stepping up deportations of undocumented immigrants. Trump said he wants to expand the legal path to citizenship, especially for high-income individuals. Trump said the important thing is that we get great people in here and they will pay. He also estimated that as many as 1 million people could buy the cards. The announcement comes as he is also pushing for a major overhaul of the H-1B visa program for highly skilled foreign workers in specialized fields, which requires a $100,000 application fee to curb overutilization. The move is expected to force tech companies and other businesses to pay significantly more to hire engineers and other highly skilled workers from abroad. Mr. Trump said tech executives would be very happy with the Golden Visa program because it would allow them to bring more workers into the United States. The Military Summary Channel reported that Moscow launched a large-scale air attack on Ukraine. Many explosions were recorded in the city of Pablo, a critical logistics artery between the front line and the rear of the Kiev forces. In addition, the Russian army has approached the first fortified areas of the Ukrainian army on the Zaporizhzhia front. A pivotal moment has arrived if the offensive operation is completed. The entire Ukrainian defense line on the Zaporizhzhia front could collapse. According to some experts, the Western Pogor's defense line has fallen. Moskva forces are occupying new positions and preparing to completely encircle the city. After the DPOL area stabilized, the situation of Ukrainian forces began to deteriorate elsewhere. The Russian army launched a limited offensive operation on the Veliki Bulik axis, attempting to connect it with Kupiansk and Von Chance. However, a major crisis with the KF army is developing on the Pogrovsky-Galiapoli axis in the area bordering the Dnipropetrovsk and Zavikia, where the Russian army continues to advance daily. Every day a new village or a large fortified area is captured by Moscow forces, and it seems that the Ukrainian army here does not have strong units to defend. Sooner or later, the Ukrainian army will have to reinforce the Pogrovsk-Galiapol axis, otherwise the entire Zaporizhzhia defense line will collapse. Meanwhile, visual evidence has emerged confirming that the Russian army has completely destroyed the chain of fortifications in the Sebryanka forest. Thus, 120 square kilometers, with some sources saying the area is up to 175 square kilometers, with a network of 16,500 trench lines and strong Ukrainian defensive structures built since 2022, fell within 1.5 months of fighting. The fortification line includes trenches visible from satellite images and fortifications from the second half of 2009. Ukraine's single trench and Dragon's Teeth obstacles have officially collapsed. For more than 3 years, the Russian army was almost powerless to attack this area. According to the Ropka channel, the Russian army bypassed the enemy's garrison, broke into Champion village, and is advancing towards the supply route to Silvers. The Russian army is successfully advancing into the central area of the Krasilimin front. The dense forested area at Kremensky, forming the large Sebryanka forest, has been completely cleared of KF forces. This success allows the Russian army to impose very unfavorable operational scenarios on the enemy across the entire front. The KF army will certainly lose the important logistical route connecting Surs and Klas-Lyman, and the K forces also face a series of difficult problems with the attack on Jampol village, beginning to allow the Russian army to access Highway T0513. Something even more dangerous has begun for the Ukrainian army in the Savers region. Forward Moskva units have gained full control of the north bank of the Seversky Canal and can now cross to the other side at many different points and conduct strong reconnaissance. The riverbed near Dranovka village is only about 50 m wide, allowing them to easily probe the enemy's weaknesses to penetrate the flanks and even the rear of the KF troop group garrisoned at Savers. However, Sursky Donis also forms the boundary between the areas of responsibility of the two defense clusters, Silvers and Klas-Lyman, of the K forces. Therefore, the Russian army has an excellent opportunity to gain an advantage. The Russian 25th Army Group is capable of establishing a complete bridgehead on the south bank and capturing Drumnovka. After that, an attack could be launched against the rear of the Surs cluster of KF forces, easing the task for the 3rd Army Group, which is advancing towards Surs from the east. Indeed, this potential operation is very risky. However, Ukrainian units in the northwest, west, and southwest Surs are bogged down in fighting. Therefore, they will not be able to react quickly. Moreover, the command is actively deploying forces, moving from various directions to the Duskovka and Belais areas that in another attempt to cut off the deep penetration of Russia's 51st Army Group near Dnipropetrovsk. This means that Ukrainian forces now have no time for S and Kars-Lyman. Veteran war correspondent Marat Kirilin said that Russia's Central Combat Group continues active offensive operations in the areas of Nabanes and the Nip Popeshops, controlling the settlement of Marapka. The Russian Ministry of Defense confirmed that its Eastern Combat Group had advanced deep into enemy defenses and captured the settlement of Novo Ivanovka in the Zabrikia region. Meanwhile, according to the Vensinox channel in Pops, the southern part of the city has been cut off by Russian troops in a final assault, and a railway junction is underway. Thus, the area south of the railway has basically been cut into two parts. Maskiva units continued to attack, advancing west of Sobotny Square in God District and breaking into the station. At the same time, progress was made along the eastern boundary of the high-rise area near Kalova Street towards the station. Threatening encirclement, KF troops are trying to counterattack. Fierce fighting continues in the Lazuni and Jusny districts, as well as at the western approaches to the railway junction. The territory south of Highway T0406 is almost entirely under Moskva's control on the Ukrainian side. The Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, General Alexander Sisky, reported that KF forces had regained control of 7 settlements in the Duz region, but he did not specify the exact time. He stated that the operation of the Ukrainian Defense Forces continues in the Duz region in the direction of the Propoli. Our troops are advancing 3 to 7 kilometers deep into enemy defenses. Control has been restored in 7 settlements, and enemy special reconnaissance groups have been driven out of 9 villages. A total of 106 square kilometers have been recaptured in the operation, and another 171 square kilometers have been cleared of Russian special reconnaissance groups. General Sinsky also said that enemy personnel losses during this period amounted to 2,456 people, of whom 1,322 were killed. He also mentioned a significant increase in Russian prisoners of war for the exchange fund. Moskova forces also lost 817 units of weapons and military equipment. In addition, Ukraine's Skraft Brada reported that a vehicle carrying a film crew from Russia's Channel 5 was blown up by a Ukrainian magnetic mine near Pors. The film crew survived but suffered concussions. A reporter said another threat was anti-personnel mines. During a field operation, the group encountered a magnetic mine that exploded under their vehicle. Fortunately, everyone survived, but the vehicle was damaged. It is reported that after the vehicle exploded, the group had to travel 200 to 400 m on foot for more than 1 hour in short segments, avoiding Ukrainian UAVs, to find the nearest bunker and take cover. They were found by Russian troops. Female war correspondent Ona Kalinovskaya said, "Thank God everyone is alive and well. All 4 only suffered concussions. The driver was the most seriously injured." Also, according to Ukraine's Skribrabda, the evening report of the Ukrainian General Staff on the 19th stated that since the beginning of the day there had been 124 combat engagements on the front, of which 47 took place in PS. Moskova conducted 55 airstrikes, dropping 98 guided bombs. In addition, they deployed 2,032 kamikaze UAVs and carried out 3,475 artillery strikes. The Ukrainian General Staff confirmed that its army had basically neutralized enemy assault efforts in Slobodansky versus Kubians, Lyman, Silvers, Kamytis, Torres, Pogrops, Novoprops, Oryov, and the Dnipro. Russia did not conduct any offensive operations in Kaipali.
On September 19, Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Maria Zakharova criticized the 20-nation drone coalition that is supplying weapons to Ukraine. Zakharova accused the coalition members of ignoring daily drone attacks by Ukraine against Russian civilians. Zakharova said that it was completely hypocritical and inappropriate for coalition countries to condemn and criticize Russia for violating international law in this context. According to the Russian Foreign Ministry spokeswoman, Ukrainian drone attacks killed 16 people and injured 116 others in Russian regions during the summer and early September. Zakharova accused Ukrainian soldiers of using drones to target defenseless people almost around the clock, deliberately targeting residential buildings, medical and community facilities, schools and shops. Ms. Zakharova warned that by supplying weapons to Ukraine, Western countries were directly involved in the crimes committed by the KF. U.S. media reported on May 16 that the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump approved the first arms aid packages to Ukraine funded by NATO allies under a new financial mechanism. These aid packages will use the priority list of Ukraine's needs, a mechanism established by the US and NATO to coordinate and meet the most urgent needs on the Kyiv battlefield.
On September 19, President of Ukraine Vladimir Zelensky announced that Ukraine intends to export some types of weapons to generate revenue for domestic defense production. President Zelensky said that Ukraine already has a number of weapons in much larger quantities than it needs. With controlled exports, we will accumulate funds to produce more of what the army needs. He listed UAVs, anti-tank weapons, and some other types. The Ukrainian leader also mentioned a number of potential buyers such as the United States, Europe, partners around the world interested in Ukrainian weapons, and those who have provided support to Ukraine. He said that Ukrainian officials will draft export guidelines in the next 2 weeks. Zelensky added that the country would establish effective controls to prevent Moscow and its allies from accessing K-weapons technology. Ukraine has been heavily dependent on Western financial and military aid since the conflict erupted in early 2022. The country has since boosted domestic defense production, notably UAVs. Earlier this month, President Zelensky said that nearly 60% of the weapons used by Ukrainian forces were domestically produced, up about 20% from half a year ago. Ukraine has allocated $1.3 billion for defense production in its 2025 budget, in an effort to reduce dependence on foreign hardware. However, President Zelensky has continued to call on Western allies to provide more weapons, especially the US-made PUS system.
On September 19, the TASS news agency reported that a Russian expert said that the establishment of the headquarters of the Ukrainian multinational force MNFU can be seen as a step to put pressure on the framework of modern military protection in the context of the continuing conflict in Ukraine. According to TASS, Mr. Alexander Stepanov, a military expert at the Institute of Law and National Security of the Academy of National Economy and the Public Journey of the Russian President Randepa, said that Ukraine is gradually losing its financial, military, and political independence. That he said that the establishment of the headquarters of the Ukrainian National Special Forces initiated by him reflects the growing role of London in shaping the strategy towards Kyiv. In his speech the expert emphasized that in the strategy of putting pressure on Russia, escalating tensions, and creating unfavorable conditions for dialogue, bilateral cooperation frameworks are being formed. An example is the Paris-London axis with London at the center. In fact, this shows a clear narrowing of the Kyiv's financial, military, and political autonomy. Mr. Stepanov believes that Britain has an influence on the peace process. He cited the event in April 2022 when a round of negotiations between Russia and Ukraine, scheduled to take place in Istanbul, Turkey, but did not bring specific results. According to this expert, at that time, former British Prime Minister Boris Johnson visited Kyiv and expressed his opposition to continuing negotiations, which he said had influenced the stance of the Ukrainian government. In addition to the political role, London, along with Paris, is considered an important contributor to military support for Kyiv. Both have transferred to Ukraine Storm Shadow and SCAP, e.g. cruise missiles with high precision. According to the Russian Standard, this support helps the technique expand its offensive capabilities, while also strengthening Britain's influence in the Ukrainian issue. The above assessments were made in the context of the conflict still evolving complicatedly, with no sign of ending. It has been repeatedly affirmed that the West, especially the UK and the US, has pushed for a military solution instead of dialogue. Meanwhile, Western countries emphasize that military aid is aimed at supporting Ukraine in protecting its sovereignty and territorial integrity against a military campaign. The statement of the mediator Alexander Stepanov reflects the Russian side's view on his role in the conflict, arguing that Kyiv is increasingly dependent on strategic decisions from London.
Amid recent threats and provocations from the U.S., the Venezuelan National Assembly has given the green light to a comprehensive cooperation agreement with Russia. This agreement promises to strengthen the already strong relationship in many areas. According to the RIA Novosti news agency, the main content of the agreement includes firstly an energy link, in which the two sides will make joint efforts to explore for oil and gas, and process heavy crude into oil for export through the Petromonagas, Rosneft, PDVSA joint venture. The OPC and the Gas Exporting Countries Forum will coordinate to counter U.S. sanctions pressure. An alternative oil transportation insurance system outlined in the new agreement will be agreed. Joint efforts to modernize Venezuela's power grid, which is vulnerable to foreign sabotage. The agreement also includes cooperation in space and technology. Accordingly, Russia has opened a new ground station of the GLONASS satellite navigation system in Venezuela and announced that the country has committed to extensive cooperation in many areas of space exploration. Russia is also an exporter of machine tools and other important equipment for Venezuela's critical infrastructure amid U.S. efforts to suppress Venezuela economically. In addition, the two countries have also stepped up cooperation in logistics and infrastructure. A new strategic maritime transport cooperation agreement is due to come into effect at the end of 2024 to boost maritime transport and logistics. New joint projects in rail and telecommunications infrastructure are underway. The agreement also covers the industrial and natural resources sectors. The new pact promotes extensive industrial cooperation in a range of areas from metallurgy and mining to pharmaceuticals. Previous successful joint ventures include the Rosaro gold mining project and prefabricated housing, with Russia providing technical know-how. There is also cooperation in international diplomatic coordination. Russia and Venezuela support each other at the United Nations against Western pressure and building a multipolar world. Venezuela has strongly supported Russia amid the crisis in Ukraine. Russia has pledged to support Venezuela in its fight against U.S. attempts to change the regime and eventually provide military assistance. The two countries have held several joint military exercises, and Russian warships and strategic aircraft have visited the Latin American country several times. Venezuela has amassed a huge arsenal of Russian-origin equipment. From licensed AK rifles to IASS Book M2 and S-300 VM surface-to-air missile systems, BM rocket launchers, M-STAR-S armored personnel carriers and combat vehicles, will run military trucks and even Su-30 jets. The new agreement, signed by the presidents of Russia and Venezuela in May this year and now ratified by the Venezuelan National Assembly, takes cooperation to a new level, focusing on countering sanctions, multilateralism and defending sovereignty against foreign interference. The agreement promises to significantly increase joint venture opportunities and simplify Eurasian Economic Union regulations on customs duties, reducing tariffs on Venezuelan goods by 25% to facilitate trade. The country is also seeking to expand acceptance of the More payment system in Venezuela. Caracas is keen to join BRIC Plus, and Russia has reaffirmed its support for Caracas membership. Along with Iran's energy infrastructure, drone technology, large-scale Chinese investment trade and Cuban medical and technical personnel, close ties with Russia are crucial in supporting the Republic of Venezuela's decades-long campaign against U.S. imperialism.
Russia has recently focused on attacking Ukraine's railway infrastructure, disrupting traffic and damaging many railway lines. According to analysts, Russia seems to want to achieve two goals after these attacks. Accordingly, Ukraine said that on the morning of 18th, Russia attacked railway infrastructure in the country's Ptyava region with Gan-2 drones, injuring one person. According to the press release, the attack damaged infrastructure and slowed down trains. A day earlier, Ukraine's state railway company UA Lenizhia also reported a major attack on its infrastructure, causing delays for trains in many areas. The most affected lines were in Odessa and Dnipro. The airstrikes by Russia and Ukraine have been continuous, but since last July, Moscow has focused on a new target: the enemy's railway infrastructure. One of the primary targets was the substations that supply electricity to the rail network. Russian attacks have disrupted rail traffic in Ukraine, forcing trains to be diverted and forcing Kyiv to deploy additional personnel to repair them. Since the conflict began, Ukraine's airports have been closed and all flights have been suspended. Rail remains one of the only two options for crossing the border or moving between cities, in addition to road transport. In Ukraine's major cities, trains are also an essential part of daily life. In Kyiv, hundreds of thousands of people rely on rail services to get to work every day. Rail is almost the only option for rapid, large-scale evacuations. This measure has proven effective since the conflict began in May 2022. According to analysts, Russia's attack on the rail network is considered one of the challenges to put economic pressure on Ukraine. The country relies heavily on the railways for the transport of goods, with thousands of locomotives carrying raw materials, resources, and fuel. The aim of such attacks is clear: to complicate passenger and cargo transport, disrupt the stability of transport, and put additional pressure on the population and the economy, said the Minister of Territorial Development of Ukraine, Oleksiy Kuleba. In early September, he launched a major attack on the Ukrainian city of Kremenchuk. One of the main targets was the bridge over the Dnipro River, which serves both road and rail traffic. The attack caused major damage to the railway infrastructure. Cutting off one of the few kilometers of road cuts paralyzed a large industrial area of Kf. At the same time, Russia launched airstrikes on railway hubs such as Lozova in the Kharkiv region and Kozyatan in the Vinnytsia region. Important junctions of the Ukrainian railway network disrupted rail traffic across the entire region. Another Russian attack hit a station in Kyiv where a passenger train was preparing to depart. The Sahet UV directly attacked the train and completely destroyed a train building. Ukraine said the station was a gathering place for civilian trains. Mr. Alexandrovsky, head of the Ukrainian Railways Board, said drones were attacking our main stations, such as Lozova, Sinin, Nikovo, and Kudyatin, as well as transfer stations across the country. The official noted that the attacks were very complex, targeting power substations, locomotive depots, and passenger terminals. According to Ukrainian analysts, the attacks are a clear sign that Russia continues to exert strong pressure on Ukraine's economy by paralyzing its logistics. The attacks have been carried out across Ukraine, causing comprehensive and systematic damage to the rail network. This strategy is not new. In the early stages of the war, Russia targeted Ukraine's fuel infrastructure, attacking depots and storage facilities, causing a persistent fuel shortage in the country. In response to Russian attacks, Ukraine was forced to disperse its storage facilities. Moscow then moved on to attack energy and gas infrastructure, targeting fuel production facilities and storage facilities. In addition, Moscow may want to disrupt one of Ukraine's most important lines of communication with its Western partners. Rail diplomacy has become a familiar term for wartime Ukraine, with trains remaining the only means for foreign leaders, ministers, and delegations to come to the negotiating table, as there are no exceptions for air travel. Even former U.S. President Joe Biden arrived by train to sign the agreement. This line of communication is crucial today, given the intense diplomatic efforts by Ukraine, Europe, and the U.S. to pressure Russia to the negotiating table.
Russia has filed an appeal to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, against a decision that Moscow was responsible for the 2014 downing of Malaysia Airlines Flight MH17, which killed hundreds of people. In a submission to the ICJ dated March 18, Russia claims that the International Civil Aviation Organization, ICAO, erred in fact and law regarding the 1944 Chicago Convention on International Aviation. In its appeal, Russia says the convention does not apply to situations of armed conflict. Investigators have ignored evidence provided by Russia. The Russian Foreign Ministry claims that the ICAO failed to conduct a comprehensive, thorough, and independent international investigation into the crash, instead relying on the questionable conclusions of a criminal investigation conducted under the auspices of a Dutch party and a falsified database largely provided by another party, the Yukon. The Russian Foreign Ministry said, "We hope that the ICJ will take a completely impartial stance on this remarkable case." According to the statement, Russia has appealed the WIO decision based on all legal grounds, applicable law, factual issues, as well as procedural violations. Previously, on May 17, 2014, a Malaysia Airlines Boeing 777 en route from Amsterdam, the Netherlands, to Malaysia was shot down in the Don Ukraine region. All 298 people on board lost their lives. Australia and the Netherlands, the two countries with the highest death toll in the MH17 tragedy, have filed a lawsuit calling on Russia to take responsibility for the incident and pay compensation. In May this year, the UN Aviation Agency YCHAO ruled that their lawsuit had a factual and legal basis.